Good morning, third grade. So this week in Bible, we are going to start talking about something different. I read all of your suggestions, and I am going to try to get to those as we kind of continue throughout the month of May. Several of you asked about more Old Testament individuals, people who lived in the Old Testament, and several people asked about the teachings of Jesus and some New Testament content. So since we were just in Daniel in the Old Testament, we are going to switch and go to the New Testament now. And we are going to be reading out of the book of Matthew, which is the first gospel. It's actually the first book in the New Testament. And specifically for this week, we are going to be talking about one of Jesus' sermons that he gave. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. So we're going to be in chapter 5, so that's the big number 5, Matthew 5. And we are going to start in verse 1 today and just read through verse 4. And so today we're going to be talking about something called the Beatitudes. Okay, and you might be kind of thinking, well, Miss B, I don't know what those are. Well, good for you. We're going to talk about it. So the Beatitudes are basically blessings that Jesus tells us that we will receive if we follow him. And blessings basically are, things that provide happiness, things that provide joy. So I'm going to read Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 4, and I'm going to explain the first two Beatitudes to you. Beginning in verse 1. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, this is Jesus, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, verse 3, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 4, Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So the Beatitudes always have kind of, blessed are these people, for they will receive this thing. So in verse 3, it says, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, and what this is telling us is, it's not talking about money. Usually when we hear poor, we think money or material possessions. But what it's actually talking about is how we should be humble and we should not brag. And how if we're going to follow Jesus, we need to have a humble spirit and not be boastful. So think about how you can kind of do that in your life. And then in verse 4, it says, Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Okay, so when you mourning is like being really, really upset about something, specifically sad. And especially now, we have a lot of things to kind of be sad about, but we also have a lot of things to rejoice in. And I think this Beatitude is really important because it tells us that even if we are really, really sad or if we're mourning, God will comfort us. And specifically, too, we can think about how we can be sad about when we sin and how we can ask God to forgive us, and God will comfort us when we ask for that forgiveness. So this week, we are going to be learning all about these different Beatitudes. So you can go ahead. It actually goes from Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, all the way through verse 12. So if you want to read all of them today, you can. I'm going to be talking about a few at a time each day. So happy learning, third grade.